She stood beneath the archway, moments away from saying "I do" to a man she believed would love her forever. But in a heartbeat, everything changed. And when her godmother, a high-ranking officer in the Air Force, emerged from the crowd, the entire gathering held its breath. What followed left the entire ceremony frozen in disbelief. Have you ever seen a moment turn from pure joy to deep pain, all in the blink of an eye? If you've ever been through something like this, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from, because your story matters too. It happened on a Saturday in early spring. Warm air, gentle breeze, the kind of weather folks in Lakeside Grove wait all year for. Sunlight flickered through hanging lights and blooming dogwood trees. Everything about the outdoor setting whispered grace. Rattan chairs, a violinist playing softly near the edge of the lawn, and an arched structure so lavish it likely cost more than a two-bedroom rental in downtown Atlanta. Imani Carter stood near the altar. She was radiant, not in the cliché, the way people describe brides, but in a way that made even the most distracted guests stop and look. There was something about her presence, unshakable, graceful, rooted. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence carried weight on its own. Her gown was sleek, with subtle embroidery at the shoulders, her hair pulled back in an elegant twist, revealing a tiny crescent moon tattoo, tucked just behind her left ear. Easy to miss unless you were looking behind her. 6 bridesmaids stood in a soft rust shade that felt earthy and intentional, not trendy, not performative, just authentically. Her mother, in a deep emerald dress, already had tears in her eyes. Her cousins were like, for family watching back in Detroit. Her former roommate, Tony, leaned over and whispered, "She looks like she walked out of a dream." The only one missing was her godmother, Major Celeste Monroe, stationed overseas in South Korea. She hadn't RSVP'd. Most assumed she couldn't make it. Orders, duty, the usual. Imani didn't talk about it, but you could see the ache in her eyes. She wanted her there. And then there was the groom. Jordan Blake. Tall, polished, wearing a slate blue suit that looked custom-made. His family had ties in government, finance, and what locals call old Lakeside money. The Blake clan showed up in tailored jackets, tight smiles, and sparkling water in hand. They weren't unfriendly, just distantly cordial. Jordan had charisma, the type that landed him internships and handshakes. But up close, he sometimes felt more like a presentation than a person. Still, Imani adored him, or at least, she believed she did. They met at a policy forum in Atlanta 3 years ago. He was the guy who stayed late to clean up, but mostly just cracked jokes and tried to get her number. She turned him down. Then maybe, then yes. Bit by bit, he got under her skin. He always told her he loved her fire, said she had brilliance in her bones. And now, here they were. The violinist stopped playing. The officiant gave a gentle nod. Chairs creaked as guests leaned in. Phones lifted. Smiles stretched. It was time for the vows. But Jordan raised his hand. "Before we start," he said, his voice steady as he picked up the mic, "I'd like to share a few words of my own." The guests chuckled softly. Some clapped. Imani turned toward him, a soft smile, but uncertainty in her eyes. This wasn't rehearsed. The officiant blinked, unsure. Imani's father leaned slightly forward. Jordan cleared his throat. "I didn't plan this part," he said, "but I thought, why not just speak from the heart?" Chairs creaked as people leaned in. One of the groomsmen smirked as champagne flute clinked somewhere in the back. "Marrying Imani is, well, the boldest thing I've ever done," he said with a chuckle. That's when the atmosphere shifted. You couldn't quite explain it, but it was there, a subtle tightening, and Jordan wasn't done. Not even close. What followed turned the wedding upside down. At first, guests assumed it was just nerves. Not everyone is built for public speaking. Weddings come with pressure. But he kept going. "I mean, let's be honest," Jordan said, gripping the mic a little tighter. "Imani is... intense." Scattered chuckles rose from his side of the aisle. His best man gave him a look, half laugh, half warning, like, "Here we go." Imani stood motionless, her smile frozen. Her hand, which had been gently holding the bouquet, dropped slowly to her side. "She's the kind of woman," he continued, "who'll argue with you about splitting the dinner bill, correct your grammar mid-sentence, and heaven help you if you try to explain something she already knows." A few more polite laughs, but others began exchanging glances. He wasn't delivering a vow. He was giving a roast. "And look," he added, adjusting his collar, "don't get me wrong. I respect that. Her strength, her passion. Pause. But it hasn't been easy. Introducing her to my family came with some resistance. Someone from his family's table chuckled aloud. Imani's mother narrowed her eyes. Her aunt pressed her lips into a thin line, head slowly shaking. The air got heavier. My mom, Jordan said. Well, she needed some time to adjust to the energy. He smiled, as if that made it better. Imani doesn't fit the mold. She's not gonna smile and nod. She's not baking pies or laughing at my dad's stories. She's real. Silence. Jordan let out a soft laugh, waiting for others to join in. A few uncertain claps. Someone coughed. I'm just saying, he went on. She's bold, unfiltered, and hey, I'm still here, right? He turned to her, smirking like he'd just nailed a punchline. Imani didn't smile back. Her eyes, now glassy, scanned the crowd. Her cousins had lowered their phones. Her old roommate looked away, visibly tense. Her father shifted in his seat. Her jaw tightened. Barely, but enough to be seen. Jordan glanced at her, still holding the mic. Babe, he asked, you good? She looked at him, but didn't answer, not yet. A low murmur swept through the guests. Heads began turning. Someone had just stepped onto the path, walking down the aisle. Unbothered by the weight in the air, she moved with a stillness that made time feel irrelevant. Imani saw her first. Their eyes locked, and for the first time since the speech began, her expression changed. Not relief, something deeper. Recognition, disbelief. Celeste Monroe, full dress uniform. Back straight, face unreadable. Nearly 6 feet tall. No makeup, no jewelry. Just the formal olive green of a U.S. Air Force officer, decorated with medals and rank that commanded respect, not a strand of her cropped hair out of place. Her expression stone cold. Whispers erupted. Guests rose slightly, craning their necks for a better view. Is that her godmother? Someone whispered. She's really military. Another asked. She came all the way from South Korea. Jordan, still facing Imani, hadn't noticed. Asterisk. Jordan let out a shaky laugh. What? He said, glancing nervously toward the crowd. I thought I was just being real. Isn't that what they say marriage is about? Honesty. Still no answer from Imani. She wasn't even looking at him anymore. Now, every set of eyes was fixed on Celeste Monroe. But she didn't rush. She didn't scowl. She didn't even blink too fast. She walked toward the altar with slow, silent steps. Her boots barely made a sound on the stone pathway. And finally, Jordan noticed he turned mid-sentence, mid-joke, and stopped cold. There she was, 10 feet behind him, standing tall, chin level, eyes locked. He staggered backward just a bit, his hand lowering the mic without thinking. Colonel Monroe, he muttered, uncertain. She didn't answer. She just stared, calm and steady, like she had been watching every moment since the beginning. She hadn't spoken a single word, but her silence felt louder than his entire speech. Celeste Monroe stood, motionless, arms tucked behind her back in that strict, composed military posture. She didn't need volume. She brought gravity. The kind of stillness that makes a whole room sit straighter, not dramatic, not forced, just that quiet tension that tells you something important is unfolding. Imani took a single step forward. She didn't say a word, but her eyes, they said plenty. The weight of years sat there, every missed birthday, every letter sent from foreign lands. Every moment she'd wished Celeste was closer. And now, she was here. Jordan tried again, clearing his throat, forcing a weak smile. Wow, didn't expect you to fly in. Surprise, right? He laughed, trying to recover, but his grip on the mic betrayed him. Celeste didn't blink. She stepped forward, methodical, until she stood just a few feet from him. Up close, you could see the life written in her features. Not age, but experience. Years of service, loss, leadership, survival. She had faced things Jordan couldn't even imagine. In conference rooms and cocktail lounges. You've always been good at filling a room with your voice, she said, steady, unshaken, still talking. Like silence owes you something. I see. A few low chuckles rippled through the crowd. Not mocking, just honest. Earned. Jordan blinked, then forced a grin. Look, I think maybe I heard you. She cut in, clear and firm. So did everyone else. The guests held their breath. Celeste shifted slightly, turning toward them. I don't care where you came from. Uptown, downtown, in dress shoes or church flats. If you sat here and watched a man disassemble a woman he claims to love in front of her people, then you're not a guest. You're a witness. Imani swallowed hard, her hands trembled. But not out of fear. She wasn't standing alone anymore. Celeste turned back to Jordan. Let me explain something to you, son. Her voice was calm, but it landed harder than a slap. Imani Carter is not your punchline. She's not your after-dinner anecdote. For colleagues and cocktails, she's not your twist ending to spice up a boring story. Jordan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Celeste took one step closer. This woman was raised by warriors. She comes from women who worked double shifts and still braided their niece's hair on Saturday mornings. Women who buried their husbands and showed up at the voting booth the very next day. Women who didn't need to shout to be heard. Heads nodded across the garden. The truth had weight. And now, it was landing. A few guests began clapping. Softly. At first. Then the applause swelled. More hands joined in. You think standing up here without a script is brave, Celeste said, her tone sharp. That's not courage. Courage is Imani. Waking up every day in a world that tells her to shrink, and choosing to rise anyway. The clapping grew stronger. Imani lowered her gaze, eyes blinking back tears. Her mother had one hand covering her mouth. One of the bridesmaids whispered, Amen, barely loud enough to hear. Celeste's voice softened. She doesn't need saving. She needs respect. Jordan scanned the crowd. He looked lost, outnumbered, cornered, but still trying to stand his ground. Look, he said nervously. I was just being real, trying to be funny. That's how I handle nerves, okay? Celeste lifted one eyebrow, the kind of gesture only someone trained to lead could pull off with that much weight. If your instinct under pressure is disrespect, she said, then maybe marriage isn't for you. She let the silence hold that sentence in the air. Imani inhaled slowly. Her heart thundered in her chest. Every moment she'd brushed aside. Every red flag disguised as a joke. Every passive jab hidden behind a grin. They all came rushing back, hitting her at once. Celeste turned her head, just slightly, and gave her a nod. Not for show. Not performative. Just presence. Like a hand on her back without ever touching her. Jordan took a step backward. He glanced at Imani, then at the guests. For once, he had nothing to say. But it wasn't over, because the next voice was hers. Imani looked at him. No blinking. Trembling. Just a stare. Long, unbroken. As if she was seeing him for the very first time. She stepped forward, slow, centered. No drama in her steps. Her bouquet now hung loosely in one hand, petals brushing softly against her dress. She didn't need notes. She didn't need a mic. 3 years, she said. 3 years. And you still can't tell the difference between teasing someone and tearing them down. Jordan looked stunned. He tried to smile, a twitchy, pleading smile. Babe, I don't, babe me, she cut in. Not after that. The crowd stiffened. Some of her friends gasped. Her aunt whispered, Lord, have mercy. Imani looked at the guests, one by one, face by face. This day was supposed to be about us. About love. About starting something real. But instead, he used this moment to turn me into a character. A punchline in his monologue. Jordan's eyes darted to his side of the aisle, searching for support. His father sat stiff. His mother folded her arms and looked away. Even his best man couldn't meet his gaze. I fought for this, Imani continued. I made room for your flaws, your stumbles, your learning curves. I kept telling myself you just needed time. That it was how you were raised. That you meant well. I coached you through hard talks. Tried to explain why your jokes hurt. Defended you when my friends raised concerns. She looked at him again, eyes bright, but not from joy. I carried this relationship. And in the one moment where I was supposed to be celebrated, you made me feel small. Jordan opened his mouth, grasping for words. I didn't mean to. It was just nerves, Imani, I swear. Nerves don't create new versions of people, she snapped. They revealed the ones that were always there. Another wave of quiet rippled across the guests. Some nodded slowly. Others just sat motionless, witnessing the unraveling of something that was never strong to begin with. Celeste stood silently now, still in uniform, still composed. She didn't need to say another word. Imani had taken command, and she wasn't handing the mic back. Asterisk. I've spent too much time trying to convince both you and myself that one day you'd become someone worthy of standing beside me, Imani said, her voice clear. But now I see you were never trying to rise. You were just hoping I'd lower myself. Silence. Complete. Heavy. She turned her eyes to the crowd. Again, this isn't some dramatic breakup speech. This is clarity. This is a woman refusing to walk into a future that someone else wrote for her. She looked down at the ring on her finger, delicate band, simple and bright. She had chosen it herself. Without pause, she slipped it off. Held it up briefly, then extended her hand toward Jordan and placed it in his. No speech, no drama, just truth. Jordan stood frozen, the mic still in his grip. But no words followed. Imani turned back toward her bridesmaids. One of her cousins stepped forward, gently taking the bouquet from her hand. Her old roommate gave her a small nod. Solidarity, sisterhood, respect. A single clap echoed from the middle row. Then another, and slowly, a wave of steady applause spread through the garden. Not loud, not theatrical, just honest. Jordan stepped back, his face flushed, the ring resting cold in his palm. Imani turned towards Celeste. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice stronger now. "I needed you more than I knew." Celeste gave a quiet smile. "You didn't need me to speak," she replied. "You just needed to remember your voice has always been enough." Imani exhaled. For the first time that day, and she smiled. Not out of politeness, but because something inside her had finally shifted. The moment wasn't quite over, but the ceremony, it was done. At least in spirit. The harpist had set her instrument down. The officiant stood awkwardly at the side, unsure whether to speak or just vanish. The floral arch behind them no longer looked like a romantic altar. It looked like a monument. Imani stepped off the small platform. Each step felt heavy, but not in a burdensome way. More like she was walking out of something that had silently been weighing her down for years. Her heels sank slightly into the soft earth. She didn't flinch. Her dress brushed the grass. She didn't care. The guests parted as she walked, expressions ranging from admiration to unease. She didn't stop, didn't look back, until a familiar figure stood in her path. Her mother. No words at first, just arms, open and sure. Imani melted into them, her forehead resting on her mother's shoulder, like she used to after long days in middle school. "You all right, baby?" her mother whispered. Imani nodded, eyes shut. "I am now." Her mother kissed her cheek and held her a second longer, then walk proud. Let him see what he lost. And she did. Imani kept moving through the garden, past friends, past old classmates, past co-workers, and even Jordan's college roommate, who mumbled something to his girlfriend, like he was still trying to piece together what he'd just witnessed. The kind of man who would later tell the story, but leave out the part where he stayed silent, while his friend humiliated a woman in front of everyone. Near the last row of chairs, Celeste stood waiting, her arms finally resting at her sides. Imani walked toward her. No hesitation. They didn't hug right away. They just looked at one another. "You look sharp in that uniform," Imani said, her voice barely above a whisper. Celeste let out a quiet grunt. "Hot as hell though." Asterisk. Imani laughed. A real laugh. The first one all day. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said. Celeste nodded. "Wasn't sure I would either," she admitted, "but something told me this wasn't a day to miss. You don't skip your child's wedding if there's still a chance to be there." Imani's eyes welled again. She blinked hard, trying to stay steady. "That means everything." Celeste tilted her head slightly. "Means more that you stood there and chose yourself." They stood in silence for a beat. Behind them, the crowd was shifting. Some guests, mostly from Jordan's side, were slipping away, quiet, unsure where to look. Others sat still, as if glued to the moment, still processing what had just unfolded. Celeste glanced toward the house. "You want to get out of here?" Imani nodded. But before moving, she looked back, toward the altar. Jordan hadn't moved, still holding the mic, still holding the ring, still standing where she'd left him, his face pale, as if unsure whether this was heartbreak or the first chapter of an internet story that would spread by Monday morning. He wasn't a monster, just a man who never realized how small his words were until they bounced off something sacred. Imani turned back to Celeste. "Yeah, let's go." Celeste didn't take her arm, didn't lead. She simply walked beside her. Same pace, same strength. As they passed the catering tent, a young server, no older than 19, murmured under his breath, "Respect." Imani gave him a nod. By the time they reached the gravel path, her friends had started gathering their things. Her bridesmaids followed at a respectful distance, unsure whether to offer comfort or give her space. The ceremony had become something no one could have predicted. But not one of them would have changed it. The sun had begun to set, casting a soft golden glow over the garden. But the warmth in the air had long been replaced by something heavier. Tension. Reflection. The crowd thinned. Guests walked off in pairs, some still whispering, some holding wedding favors like they weren't sure whether to keep them or toss them away. No cake was cut. No dancing followed. Inside the house, staff packed away untouched flutes and trays of food. One woman from the venue leaned in to whisper, "Do we still serve dinner?" Her coworker just shrugged, silent, resigned. Out front, Imani sat on a weathered bench, her heels off, her dress gathered at the hem, creased at the edges. The veil she had carefully pinned that morning now lay folded in her lap, less like bridal attire, more like a memory. She watched the gravel path. Cars pulled away one by one. Her face wasn't sad, just calm. Lighter. Celeste stood a few feet away, leaning on a porch column, still in uniform, even in a sea of lace and pastel flowers. She looked like she belonged. "Do you regret it?" Celeste asked. Imani didn't look at her, not even a little. Celeste nodded. Good. They let the quiet settle. The crunch of tires, leaves rustling, footsteps fading into the distance. Then Imani spoke. "You know," she said slowly, "for so long, I believed that if I couldn't make this work, I'd be proving everyone else right." Celeste tilted her head. "What people? The ones who said I was too opinionated, too independent, too much." Imani exhaled. "So I compromised. Little by little. At first it didn't seem like much. Talking less, asking for less, being easier. I didn't even realize how far I'd bent until I couldn't recognize the woman staring back at me in the mirror." Celeste pushed off the porch column and sat beside the bench. "Love doesn't ask you to shrink, and it sure as hell doesn't ask you to disappear." Imani gave a soft laugh. "Wish I'd figured that out sooner." Celeste shook her head. "You figured it out at the altar. That's early enough." Imani smiled, then turned to her godmother. "Were you always this wise?" Celeste smirked. "Takes a few decades, a couple of deployments, and 1,000 foolish men to gain this kind of clarity." Just then, Leo Moni's college roommate walked down the steps holding 2 bottles of water and a tote bag stuffed with backup flats, lip gloss, and emergency pins. "I grabbed your things," she said gently. Double quotes. "Also, pretty sure Jordan's mom tried to slap the wedding planner." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Wait, seriously?" "She missed," Leah said, grinning. The planner ducked. "Honestly, kind of impressive." Celeste let out a genuine laugh. Deep, real. From the chest, Leah handed Imani a water bottle. "You good?" Imani nodded. "Yeah, I actually am." Leah leaned in and hugged her. "I'm proud of you. Not because of how it ended, but because you stood your ground in front of everyone. That takes guts." Imani hugged her back. "Thanks for not leaving." "Never would." As Leah walked back inside, Celeste gently tapped Imani's shoulder. "You know what you're doing tomorrow?" Imani shrugged. "No clue." "Perfect," Celeste said. "That means you've got options." Imani looked over at her. "You think people are going to judge me for walking out like that?" "Some will," Celeste replied. "But those people aren't your people." Imani nodded slowly. And it all started to make sense. The silence, the applause, even the ache. It wasn't wasted. It was a wake-up call. And sometimes, clarity only arrives through the wreckage. She stood up, smoothing her gown out of habit. "You hungry?" Celeste grinned. "Starving." They walked down the steps together, past half-melted centerpieces and toppled flower cones, past empty chairs and abandoned programs. The ceremony had ended in a storm. But she didn't feel broken. She felt free. "But before we close this chapter, there's one last truth she needs you to hear. A truth far too many realize when it's already too late." Later that night, Imani sat cross-legged on her living room couch, still wearing the same dress, makeup a little faded, but her eyes clear. The house was still no music, no toasts, just the quiet spin of the ceiling fan and an occasional car rolling by. Her phone buzzed over and over. Messages from people who had been there, others from those who had already heard. "Are you okay?" That was wild. Never saw that coming. She read them all, but didn't feel the need to reply. Celeste was asleep in the guest room. Door cracked open. Her suitcase sat in the hall, military tags still dangling. Imani had offered to wash her uniform. Celeste waved her off, said it had survived worse. Then Imani opened her phone. Not social media, not texts, Just a voice recorder. She hit record not for an audience, not for a feed, just for her. You don't really notice when it starts, she said into the quiet. When you begin shifting who you are so someone else can stay comfortable. It's little things, changing how you speak, laughing at things that don't feel right, swallowing words just to keep the peace. And one day you're standing at your own wedding, listening to the man beside you tell a room full of people that your confidence is inconvenient, that your strength is a flaw. She paused, let the silence breathe. I almost let it slide. I really did. I almost smiled through it, because I didn't want to ruin the moment. But here's the truth. Moments will be made, whether you speak up or stay silent. The only difference is who's holding the pen. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just rang true. I don't regret walking away. I regret waiting that long to remember who I am. Imani looked down at her hands. Bare now. No ring. No bouquet. Just skin. Strong. Certain. I hope someone out there hears this and stops second-guessing themselves. I hope they walk out of the room that makes them feel small, even if that room is filled with applause. She reached over and tapped the screen. Recording stopped. The lesson wasn't complicated, but it was heavy and true. Respect isn't a gift someone gives you when they're in the mood. It's a standard, something you set, and something you protect. Love doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't humiliate you. It doesn't twist your strengths into flaws just because they don't serve someone else's story. Imani didn't call herself brave. Not that night, not even the next morning, but with time. She came to understand courage isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's simply choosing peace over performance. 1 week later, she sent an email to her guests. No drama, no long explanation, just a message, thank you, to those who showed up with love and support. The wedding won't be happening, but the future is alive, so am I. Of course. People would talk. There would be whispers in coffee shops, in group chats, in conference rooms. Some would say she overreacted. Others would say she saved herself. But none of it would change the truth. She had chosen herself, in front of everyone. And that's something most people spend a lifetime trying to do quietly, alone, in secret. She did it in a wedding dress, holding nothing but her name. So if you've ever been in a place where you made yourself small, just to keep the peace, let this be your reminder. You don't owe comfort to anyone who treats your value like a footnote. You don't need permission to walk away. Choose yourself, even if your voice shakes. And if this story hits something in you, sit with that for a moment. Where in your life are you shrinking? What would it mean to stand up instead? And if you know someone who needs this message, pass it on. We all deserve to be seen without apology.